I still remember the exact moment I realized I had become invisible. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting, no big fight. It was just me, standing in my own kitchen at 7:30 in the morning, and my husband walked right past me like I wasn't even there. My name is Margaret Maggie Holloway. I am 70 years old, and that morning, something inside me quietly broke in a way I can't fully explain. My husband, Robert Holloway, everyone calls him Bob, is 72. He used to be a railroad engineer, a man of routine, schedules, and silence. The kind of man who always came home at the same time, ate at the same chair, and said the same few words every day. For years, I told myself that was just how marriage becomes after a long time. Predictable, quiet, stable. But I never expected it to become empty. That morning, I was standing by the counter holding a cup of coffee I had made for him, just like I had done for decades. The smell of toast filled the kitchen. The sunlight came through the blinds in soft lines across the floor. Bob walked in, still half asleep, his hair messy, his eyes on his phone. I smiled a little. "Good morning, Bob. I made your coffee." He didn't look up. He just grunted something that wasn't even a word and poured himself cereal instead. And then he walked past me. Not angry, not rushed, just past me, like I was part of the furniture. I stood there, holding that cup of coffee longer than I should have. My hand started to shake a little, but I didn't know why. Maybe you have felt this too, when someone stops seeing you, but still shares the same room. I didn't say anything that morning. I just poured the coffee down the sink later when he wasn't looking. That was the first time I thought, am I invisible now? But the truth is, it didn't start that morning. It started slowly, years ago. I just didn't notice it happening. I remember when our house used to be loud, not in a bad way, just full of life. Our children, David, Melissa, and Aaron, running through the hallway, arguing over the TV remote, leaving shoes everywhere. Bob would complain about the noise, but I would laugh. Now the house is so quiet I can hear the refrigerator humming. The children are grown now. They have their own lives, their own families. They visit sometimes, but not often. And when they do, it feels like they are guests in a place they once called home. That same week, something small happened that stayed with me. I was sitting in the living room folding laundry. Bob was in his recliner watching TV. The news was on, something about traffic delays, nothing important. I said, "David called me yesterday. He said the kids are doing well." No response. I looked over. Bob? Still nothing, not even a glance. Then I realized he wasn't ignoring me on purpose. He simply didn't hear me. Or maybe he didn't think I was speaking to him in a way that mattered anymore. That thought hurt more than if he had argued with me. Later that night, I stood in front of our bedroom mirror. I looked at my face carefully. The lines around my eyes, the gray hair pulled back in a loose clip, the tired look I didn't remember earning so deeply. I whispered to myself, when did I disappear? At 70, I thought I would feel wiser, maybe calmer, maybe even proud of the life I built. Instead, I felt like I was fading inside my own home. Bob came into the room later. He didn't say anything. He just turned off the light on his side and got into bed. No goodnight, no small touch on my hand like he used to do years ago. Just silence. That silence, it has a weight to it now, a heavy one. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe evenly within minutes. He always falls asleep fast. I never do anymore. My thoughts don't let me. I kept thinking about all the small moments I ignored over the years. The dinners where we barely spoke. The vacations where we sat in the same car but said nothing meaningful. The birthdays he forgot and the ones I stopped reminding him about. It didn't happen all at once. It faded in pieces. Like paint peeling off a wall you walk past every day until one day you finally notice it's gone. The next morning, I went to the grocery store alone. I remember standing in the checkout line, watching people talk to each other. The cashier smiled at the woman in front of me, asked her about her day. When it was my turn, she scanned my items quickly and looked past me. Total is $32.80. That's it, no eye contact, no small talk. And suddenly, I felt it again, that strange feeling of not existing in a space where you are clearly standing. On the drive home, I gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. I thought about stopping somewhere else, anywhere, just to hear a human voice that felt like it was directed at me. But I didn't. I went home. Because home is where you go, even when it doesn't feel like it sees you anymore. When I pulled into the driveway, Bob's truck was already there. He was inside, watching TV again. Same routine. I sat in the car for a few extra minutes before going inside. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping something would change if I waited long enough. But nothing did. I walked in, and he didn't even turn his head. And that's when I finally admitted it to myself. I am still here, but I am no longer being seen. And somehow, that hurts more than being alone. That night, I couldn't sleep the way I used to. Bob was already asleep beside me, breathing steady like nothing in the world had changed. I stayed on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling again, listening to the old house creak. At 70, even silence feels louder. I kept thinking about that word, invisible. It didn't come from anger. It came from something worse, a kind of quiet acceptance, like I had slowly trained myself to expect nothing and still smile anyway. The next morning, I woke up earlier than Bob. I stood in the kitchen without making coffee at first. Just stood there. The sunlight came in again, same as always. Same blinds, same counter, same life. But I felt different inside it. I didn't rush to make his breakfast like I usually did. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, alone. That was new for me. Bob came in a few minutes later, still half awake. He opened the fridge, looked inside, closed it, then reached for cereal again. He didn't notice me sitting there, or maybe he did, and it just didn't register anymore. I finally spoke. "Bob," I said softly. He paused for a second. I think we don't talk anymore." He kept pouring milk into his bowl, not even looking at me. "We're talking now," he said casually. That was all, just that. Like that was enough. I nodded slowly, even though he wasn't watching. And I realized something painful. To him, this was normal. To me, it felt like disappearing in real time. Later that day, I went to the post office. I don't even remember why I chose there. Maybe I just wanted to stand somewhere different and feel like I existed outside my house. The woman at the counter asked me, "Next in line?" I stepped forward. She looked at me properly, not for long, but enough. "Do you need stamps or shipping today?" Her voice felt directed at me. It sounds small, but at that moment, it felt like warmth. I bought stamps I didn't even need, just so the interaction would last a little longer. On the way home, I passed a small park near our neighborhood. There were a few older women sitting on a bench, laughing softly. One of them waved at me, even though she didn't know me. I hesitated, then waved back, and something inside me tightened, because I realized I used to be like that. I used to laugh easily. I used to wave first. I used to exist in places without questioning whether I was noticed. When I got home, Bob was still in front of the TV. Same channel, same chair, same posture. He said, "What's for dinner?" No greeting, no question about my day. Just that, like I was a function, not a person. I stood in the doorway for a moment longer than usual. Then I said something I didn't expect myself to say. "I don't know yet." He finally looked at me for a second, not surprised, not curious, just briefly aware. Then he went back to the screen. That night, I didn't cook right away. I sat in the living room instead, watching the same TV he was watching, even though I wasn't really seeing it. At one point, he got up and went to the kitchen to get water. He walked right past me again, and I noticed something strange. It wasn't that he was ignoring me on purpose. It was worse. I had stopped being part of his awareness, like a chair, like a wall, like something permanent and unchanging that didn't require attention. After he went to bed early, I stayed downstairs longer. I opened an old drawer in the hallway cabinet. It was full of forgotten things, receipts, old photos, random notes. At the bottom, I found a picture. It was me, maybe 40 years ago. I was standing in front of our old house, holding a baby, Melissa, I think. Bob was beside me, smiling, really smiling. His arm was around my shoulder. I stared at that photo for a long time. I barely recognized myself. Not because I changed physically, but because I looked like someone who believed she was seen. I whispered, "What happened to us?" And then I corrected myself. No, what happened to me? Because that's what it felt like now. like I was the only one still searching for something that used to exist between us. That night, I placed the photo on the kitchen counter before going to bed. I don't know why I did that. Maybe I wanted him to see it. Maybe I wanted him to remember something I was afraid I was the only one still carrying. But when I woke up the next morning, the photo was still there and untouched, like everything else I try to say, like everything else I try to be. The morning after I left that photo on the counter felt different in a way I didn't expect. Not because something changed, but because nothing did. The photo was still there, exactly where I placed it, slightly crooked, the same soft light hitting its edges. And Bob? He walked past it again like it wasn't even part of the house. That's when I understood something I had been avoiding for a long time. It wasn't just that I felt invisible. It was that nothing in our home required me to be seen anymore. I stood there, holding the counter edge for a moment. Then I quietly put the photo back into the drawer. Not because I stopped caring, but because I stopped expecting it to matter. That day, I decided to go out alone again. I told Bob, "I'm going to the library." He barely looked up. "Drive safe." That was it. No, "What for?" No, "Do you want me to come?" Just a sentence that ended before it even reached me. The library was quiet, like always, but in a different way than my house. There, silence felt respectful, not empty. I sat in a corner near the windows and just watched people. A young mother reading to her child, an older man flipping through newspapers, a couple sitting together without speaking but still sharing space in a way that felt connected. I didn't feel jealous. That surprised me. I just felt far away from something I used to understand. After a while, I picked up a book but didn't read it. Instead, I wrote my name on the inside cover of a notebook I found in my purse. Margaret Holloway. Then I stared at it. I whispered under my breath, "I am still here." It sounded strange saying it out loud, like I needed to remind myself. On the way home, I stopped by a small bakery I hadn't visited in years. The smell of fresh bread hit me before I even opened the door. The woman behind the counter smiled. "Hi there, what can I get you?" Again, that simple thing, a voice aimed at me. I ordered a loaf I didn't really need. I carried it home, like it mattered more than it should have. When I stepped inside, Bob was in the garage. I could hear tools clanking. He was fixing something again. He always was. Something mechanical, something that made sense to him. I stood in the kitchen holding the bread, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't immediately start preparing dinner. I just set it down. That evening, something small happened. Bob came inside later than usual. He looked tired. His hands were dirty from the garage. He glanced at the table. "Did you eat?" I looked at him for a second. It wasn't a warm question. It wasn't really concern. It was routine. Still, it was something. "Yes," I said. He nodded. Then he paused, like he was about to say something else, but didn't. Instead, he just washed his hands and sat down. We ate in silence. But that night, the silence felt different. Not softer, just more honest. Like we were no longer pretending there was more conversation coming later. After dinner, I washed the dishes slowly. Bob turned on the TV. Same sound, same glow in the living room. But I found myself watching my own reflection in the kitchen window while I worked. I noticed how automatic everything had become, how I knew exactly where every plate went without thinking, how I moved through the house like I had memorized it instead of lived in it. And I asked myself something I had never dared to ask before. If I stopped doing all of this, would anything actually change? Would anyone notice? That question stayed with me long after I finished the dishes. Later, I went to our bedroom early. Bob stayed downstairs longer than usual that night. When he finally came up, he paused at the door for a moment. "I'm going to bed," he said. I nodded. He didn't come to my side of the bed right away. He stood there, like he was thinking about something. Then he asked, almost casually, "Are you okay?" I looked at him. That question felt unfamiliar. Not because he had never asked it before, but because it sounded like something said out of habit, not attention. Still, I answered honestly, "I don't know anymore." He didn't respond to that, just turned off the light and lay down. But I stayed awake longer than him again, and this time, I wasn't just thinking about being invisible. I was thinking about something deeper. Maybe I hadn't disappeared completely. Maybe I had just stopped asking to be seen. And once that happens, even love can turn into background noise. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what I said in the dark. I don't know anymore. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it felt like the first honest sentence I had spoken in a very long time. Bob was already asleep beside me again. Same steady breathing, same distance that no longer surprised me. But I stayed awake. For the first time, I wasn't just noticing the silence in our marriage. I was noticing my place inside it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and didn't get out of bed right away. I just lay there and listened. No rushing footsteps, no voices calling my name, no urgency waiting for me in the kitchen. At 70, I used to think mornings would feel peaceful, but this wasn't peace, it was absence. When I finally got up, I didn't make coffee. I didn't set the table. I just stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at all the small things I had taken care of for decades without ever thinking about stopping. Bob came out later, like always. Cereal, phone, routine. But this time, I didn't move. I stayed seated at the table. He glanced at me briefly. "You okay?" That same question again. This time, I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I said, "Do you know what day it is?" He paused, looked at me properly for the first time in a while. "Tuesday?" I nodded slowly. "It's my birthday, Bob." Silence. Not dramatic silence, just real silence. He blinked once. Oh, that was it. No apology, no reaction, no memory surfacing, just that single word. Oh. I looked down at my hands on the table. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel surprised. I think I had already known, but hearing it out loud made something settle inside me, something quiet, something final. Later that afternoon, I went out alone again, not because I wanted to escape, but because I needed air that didn't feel like memory. I ended up walking slowly through a small park near the neighborhood, the same park I had passed before. The benches were mostly empty. I sat down under a tree and watched the wind move through the branches. A woman nearby smiled at me and said, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I nodded. Yes, it is. And I realized I hadn't said something that simple in a long time without feeling like I was interrupting someone else's world. I stayed there for a while. No urgency, no expectation, just existing. When I got home, the house was dark, even though it wasn't late. Bob was in the living room, TV on, same chair. He didn't say anything when I came in, but on the kitchen table, there was something I hadn't expected. A small cake, store-bought, simple, plastic box still on the side, and a card. My hand shook a little when I picked it up. It wasn't fancy. Inside it said, "Happy birthday, Maggie. Sorry I forget things sometimes. Bob." That was it. No decorations, no extra words, just a late acknowledgement of a day that already felt like it had passed without me. Bob stood in the doorway quietly. "I got it earlier," he said. "Forgot to give it to you." I looked at him for a long moment, and I finally understood something I had been circling for days. He didn't stop loving me. He stopped noticing me. And there is a difference that hurts in a very specific way. I sat down at the table. He sat across from me. We ate the cake slowly. No celebration, no conversation. But something shifted, not between us, but inside me, because I realized I had been waiting for him to bring me back into his awareness. And maybe he never would. Not because I wasn't worth seeing, but because life had trained us both into silence we never questioned. After he went to bed that night, I stayed in the kitchen longer than usual. I looked at the space where I used to always stand. The sink, the counter, the place where I made everything run smoothly without thinking. And I made a decision. Not dramatic, not loud, just clear. Tomorrow, I would start seeing myself again, even if no one else did. Even if it meant learning how to live differently inside the same house. I turned off the light and went to bed. Bob was already asleep, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was disappearing beside him. I felt like I was finally beginning to return to myself. The invisible life didn't end suddenly, but it stopped owning me, and that was the first real change in a very long time.